Hello and welcome to Hope for Today. Glad to have you. If you're watching, thank you for being a part of this. If you're listening, again, thank you for being a part of this. And I think this is going to be an exciting time today. We're talking about something that maybe you don't hear a lot about, but it's all around all of us in every nation, and that's pornography. And today, my guest, I'm excited to introduce to you Aaron Zint from California. He's in Redding, California with Bethel Church, and he also has some ministry there, has an outside job. So, Aaron, welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Well, thank you, and I'm looking forward to getting involved in what we're going to talk about today. But you have an exciting ministry there. You've written a book. Tell us the title of your book.
Yeah, it's called Numb to Known, The Surprising Path Away from Porn.
Okay, so he's going to talk about, both of us will be talking about freedom from pornography addiction.
Right.
And what's the best place for them to reach you? How can they reach you?
Yeah, they can go to zintsquad.com, and that's where, there's a link to the book, but that's on Amazon as well. And then just kind of everything that me and my wife, we're a team that do a lot together. Everything we have to offer can be found there.
Okay, well, thank you, Aaron. Aaron, I remember the first time I saw pornography, I was 11 years old. You probably have studied pornography a bit more than me and how it affects and everything. Is that about the normal age for a guy, somewhere in there?
Statistically, depending on which statistics you find, it's about 11 years old, and those statistics will change every year. And unfortunately, the average age is typically dropping. Yeah.
Right. How about for girls? Is it the same age?
I don't know the stats specific on that. I think that what I've read was it was like children. They just said children in general,
children.
which is,
And when I was growing up, pornography was really a man's issue, but no longer. It's a people issue.
Yeah.
And so I was delivered from a pornography addiction. In fact, in March, I'll be speaking to several hundred pastors in Egypt on pornography, because it's still kind of taboo in the church there, but it's a problem.
Yeah.
And it needs to be dealt with. And for here in the States for a long time, it was a taboo issue. In some places it still is, but I think we need to deal with it more, hear about it more. We as a nation, the United States, I guess we're still the greatest perpetrator of pornography on the world. It's awful what we have hoisted on the world as a once really strong Christian nation. So I think we need to talk about this, especially in church, not and in church, but especially in church. So Tell us, if you don't mind sharing your pathway, what happened in your life.
Yeah, I had grown up. I think the first time I saw it was about 7 years old, and it was a magazine, but nonetheless. And then it was probably about a few years later that I saw a video for the first time. A few years after that was like internet became prevalent and accessible. And so I grew up with it from a very young age. And, when that happens during very formative years, it changes or shapes the way that you see the world. And so it's not just I did something bad at a young age, because a lot of times for kids, like, they don't even know that it's not like they're choosing into it. Most kids are, it's being displayed to them either accidentally through the internet or from a friend or from somebody else. And so it really is this thing that begins to shape the way that we see the world. And so that was true for me as I got older. I grew up in a Christian home, but I wasn't really pursuing the Lord, or it was all about getting to heaven, and that was pretty much it.
Right.
And so I had no desire to stop looking at porn, to stop searching for it when I had the ability to do so. But it was when I met the Lord when I was 16, like, I had an encounter with God at my youth group. And that was the first time that I began to feel a conviction around it. And I really wanted to pursue purity and pursue wholeheartedness towards the Lord. And so I had a stint of time, a couple years, where I was just praying for people. I read Bill Johnson's book, When Heaven Invades Earth, and I was just gripped by the supernatural and what was possible. And so I had a ton of things I was going after with a lot of good friends, really connected. And it was after those 2 years I had a good chunk of sobriety, like just I had no desire for it. I mean, there were times where I felt a pull, but man, I had a lot of
Sure.
willpower at the time. Um, but what I began to see after I graduated high school and I moved away, moved to Reading, it was all the things that were beneath the surface that hadn't been addressed yet. And because I hadn't been looking at porn, I had decided within myself, like, oh, it's totally done. Like the behavior itself is finished, so I have nothing really to worry about.
Right.
In reality, what I began to discover over the course of the next 15 years that I've been up here, um, is it slowly started coming back into my life. Like it was a lot of small compromises that kind of like grew and grew and grew over time. And yet, what I found myself in the middle of being married, like I met my wife up here, we got married, is man, it felt uncontrollable. I was continually going to it. I'd go in like these 3-month cycles of like, I'm solid, I've got this under control. And then boom, I acted out, and so forth. It's just kind of this repeated cycle. And so I
Right.
eventually joined a group of men who were all going after the same thing. And what I found there was really what changed my life. It was this radical vulnerability that these men had in sharing in a small group with each other. These are the dark things in my past. These are the secrets that I'm still holding on to. They were just gutting themselves on a deep level. And in what I realized over the course of time, and really how what my book is based on now, is that porn itself wasn't the problem for me. Porn was one of the solutions I had found to the real problem. And the real problem,
Right.
as I discovered over time, was isolation, passivity, and pain. And these three things that I discovered, that as I pursued connection, as I pursued intentionality, as I pursued healing for the pain, I began to find freedom in a way that I didn't think was possible. In that my heart was beginning to get full in a way that I didn't have to go after something to fill it. Like, this Proverbs,
Right.
to the hungry, anything bitter is sweet. And I found for the first time, like, oh, these bitter things no longer taste sweet. And so it's been a process over the last 10 plus years that I've been in this group, but a process of like uncovering new things in me and going like, well, I didn't realize that was there. Let's address that. But doing it in connection and community with men, and just continually pursuing healing and learning to take good care of myself, that I begin to
How?
find real freedom, that sustainable and life changing.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Aaron. That's a really intriguing journey you took, and I'm glad it ended well.
Yeah.
Ending well, meaning you're helping other people now. The
Yeah. Yeah.
scripture I want to read that relates to this, 1 Corinthians 6:18, flee from sexual immorality, which pornography certainly falls into that category. All other sins a person commits are outside the body, but whoever sins sexually sins against their own body.
Yeah.
I'm pre internet, so
Yeah.
pornography for me was still pictures.
Mhm.
Just a magazine, and
Right.
didn't really get to store it because I lived in a pastor's house.
Yeah.
So with the internet, a lot of young people, their first experiences with sexuality are with pornography,
Mhm.
multiple views on pornography, and it is part of their exploration. If they masturbate, they want to have pornography with them. How does this affect their sexuality? How are you seeing it affect this upcoming generation's sexuality?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because it is a unique way that it does affect people having, an endless stream of novelty.
Right.
There's always more, there's always new, and then the um, outside of like having it pictures and things that you have to really go after, you don't have to work hard to get a
Right.
giant
It's just right
delivery
there.
that you used to be able to get only from like working real hard to go find it somewhere. And like I would always
Right.
search homeless camps, abandoned homeless camps, or have to root through somebody's house, like when they weren't around, to try to find this stuff. So there was a lot of like intentionality around there. Now it's just like you open your phone like when you're in the bathroom and it's available.
Right there.
So there's a couple different things. It's called a supernormal stimulus in kind of the psychology world. in that like a Big Mac from McDonald's is a super normal stimulus. There any kind
Sure.
of thing that delivers an extreme rush of dopamine to the brain that isn't really found in the natural world uh,
Right.
is a supernormal stimulus. And the constant use of a supernormal stimulus dumps so much dopamine in your brain, it actually begins to like shut down receptors, and so that normal things in life aren't exciting anymore. And so you'll find
And
a lot of people in their when they're married in their sex life, they can't connect with their partner as easily because they are so familiarized with all the craziness of porn that is so outside of what reality is in a
right.
relationship that it's difficult to actually be with their partner and present and enjoy their partner sexually because they've just been accustomed to something that is just outside of the natural realm. So it's
Right.
like doing I only eat ice cream, and then somebody goes like, "Hey, here's broccoli, here's nutrients. This is
Uh,
actually going to help you," and you're like, "Oh, this is awful. Like, let's dump some sugar on it and maybe it'll be good." And so what I found for
right.
myself in my wife, and I've heard this from many men that I've worked with, is that they couldn't actually be turned on by their wife because it was just so much, their brain was so stuck in pornography and what they
Right.
were finding there. And you get what's this guy Andrew Bowman calls a pornographic way of relating with the world, a pornographic view of the world, and it's one where how do I get my needs met now?
Right.
How do
Very
I
selfish, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the word he uses is it's very selfish, it's very me focused. And I'm honestly, from the decades of looking at porn, I'm still untangling the selfishness in my own sex life with my wife that I
Man.
realized even recently, like, oh, this part of our sex life where like the communication around it has been so focused on me, me, me. I didn't even realize that that was just another lens that I'm just continuing to undo. And the Lord is just like taking layers and layers and layers. There was a moment, there's moments where the Lord comes in and does something, boom, just like setting the Israelites free. And then there's now I'm in the promised land. How do I live this out and continue to
Right.
hold orders? And these are some of the things that it feels like the Lord's still doing. But we got men who are in their 20s, early 20s, dealing with erectile dysfunction as a
Sure.
result of continual porn use. And that was never a young man's problem.
Sure. Right.
Now it is because of that. And so you have a lot of different things going on in the brain, a lot of different things going on physiologically, and then a lot of things going on spiritually and emotionally that are very destructive to how a normal, mutually beneficial, mutually loving connection with another human being is supposed to
Right.
be.
Right. Well, wow, that's insightful. Back to the scripture, it says concerning sexual immorality. Again, porn falls into this. All other sins a person commits, all kind of things we could do wrong are outside the body, but whoever sins sexually sins against their own body. What does that
Nice.
mean to you? How do you define that scripture to people?
Yeah, I'd say that because like sexuality is so tied on so many levels, that when we are the process of like having an orgasm and what that does to the brain, the kind of chemicals it releases, like an orgasm is meant to bond two people, and this is like the way that God, I believe God
Right.
intended it, is that you and your wife would experience an orgasm, and the oxytocin, that the chemical release, is meant to seal and bring you together in a way that nothing else can. So having an oxytocin
Right.
release of that magnitude by yourself, let's say if you're just looking at porn or even, sexual
Sure.
immorality or acting out with somebody outside of marriage, or even when like dealing with guys who go to massage parlors or see prostitutes or things like
Right.
that. There's a bonding that happens with a person or an object that was just never meant to. And what that does is that like in a spiritual way, it kind of like starts to form soul ties. And Chris Valton has said this, a pastor of my church, had said, when when two people have sex, it's like gluing two boards together. And when they get married, it's like that same thing. And when you try to pull that apart, little pieces of each board are left on the other. That
And
the glue binds them together in a way that when you pull them apart, there are going to be pieces left. And so that's what like
sure.
soul ties look like. It is harmful to leave yourself in all these places where you've created soul ties, or even with a computer screen, to leave soul
Right.
ties with all these nameless, faceless people over years and years of this. that you've given yourself away, but also like acting out outside of pornography have taken on other people and in a way spiritually that just you weren't meant to hold that much and to take that much on. It just makes it really difficult to walk through the process of healing that needs to happen. So that's kind of how I see
Wow,
that.
what a great answer. Thank you for that. That's extremely insightful.
Right.
Give us the title of your book again.
Yeah.
Now people probably are like, wait a minute, I didn't write that down.
Yeah.
What's the title of your book again?
Yeah. Numb to known. The surprising
Numb
path
to
away.
Know.
Yeah. Numb to known.
Yeah, that's great. I'm sure you're going to want to get this book. You may say, I don't know anybody with a porn problem. You probably know a lot of people with a porn problem because it's
Statistically,
a
you know a
big
lot of
deal.
people were problems. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a common
Mhm.
denominator, unfortunately.
Yep.
And so, in writing this book, what has it done for you when you see
And
people read this book and they're helped by it? What does that do to you?
yeah, I cried the other day, getting a voice memo from a buddy of mine he was doing coaching and different things like that. He's a pastor at our
Oh,
church, and he had sent me just kind of like a testimony of a guy who had read it, and I cried because it was like at the heart of what I was hoping would happen with this book. I know that just
right,
reading a book or just hearing a sermon is not going to fix anyone. There's going to, but there I know the hope in these things is that the Lord will use it to start someone's healing process, someone's healing
right,
journey, someone's journey into like a wholehearted living. And so I had hoped I have like 5 sections in the book. The first one just talks about, hey, porn's not the actual problem here. It's all the reasons we want it and all the reasons why
right,
it fills a need that it should never have filled. And the next sections are, oh, I didn't know I was lonely, isolated. I didn't know I was passive, and then the next section, I didn't know I was in pain. And so when
man,
my goal in writing this book was to have people, guys who are struggling, and women. I directed it mostly towards men because I knew that was largely my audience that I'm connected to. However, I know this is
right,
universal problem, but so I wanted people to, in their own journey, to go, oh, oh, I didn't know I was lonely. Like the people who
mm,
are isolated, like me, I had no idea I was isolated. And there's lots of reasons for that that I dive into in the book. But to discover that and realize I need connection, I need connection
right,
so bad, and then to actually do something about that, or to realize, oh man, my passivity, the way that I've avoided things because I've been so scared of them, has cost me so much. What am I going to do about that now? Or I didn't realize that I thought I had such a good life. I grew up in a Christian home. Like I shouldn't have had pain. And then to discover, oh, that stuff is in there. And that kind of discovery is how I get excited, and it touches my heart because when somebody goes, oh, Jesus, I have pain. He's like, I
and
know I've been waiting to take
right,
that from you.
and
I've been waiting to put the lonely in a family. But if the lonely doesn't think they're lonely, like I'm going to show you family and you're going to reject it. And so there's so many times I've heard multiple people now say like, oh, I didn't realize I was lonely. And that's really what it does for me. It just goes, okay, I know that guy now at least has a direction to go. And Lord,
right.
I can't wait to see what kind of fruit comes from that.
It's incredible. That has to be really rewarding.
Yeah.
Um, Perhaps I'm sure there are people watching this and saying pornography is not my problem, but it's my spouse's problem. Either my husband or my wife, they're
Yeah.
dealing with pornography issues, and I know about it. They know about it. What would you say to the spouse of a person struggling with pornography?
Yeah. I would say one, uh, as difficult and painful as it probably is to know this, it's not actually about you, as in, and
Right,
not to invalidate pain, but to say, they're not doing this because of a deficiency on your part. Even if some guy, some guys think that, oh, if I just had more sex, I wouldn't need this. I have
right,
discovered myself. You can have an abundance of sex, you can have an abundance of sin-free orgasms within your marriage, and it will not fix the isolation. It will not fix the pain. And so, if orgasm was the answer, sex addicts all around the world would be the healthiest people in the world because they're getting a
right.
lot.
That's true.
And so, I would say them like this isn't a thing about you. And at the same time, they're in any kind of addiction. Um, especially when the person is married, if one of them is addicted, there is a system or an ecosystem, a cycle or rhythm that has been created within your marriage that probably needs to be addressed outside of just them working on the pornography problem. But when me and my wife do coaching with couples, and this is their experience, we want to take each of the couple's person's part and hand it to them, because you can't fix
Uh-huh.
your husband or your wife's pornography problem. However, whatever needs to be addressed in you, you have control over that. You have the ability to bring
Right.
change there. And so I would just say, one, like, I know it's going to be easy. It'd be easiest to take it on as shame of where you're failing. However, that's not the case. But at the same time, whatever you can discover that is your part to play in this relationship that needs some repair or needs some change, take as much as that as you can. Your best day is when you have a friend or a counselor say, hey, you're 51% of the problem, because then that means you have
Right.
51% of the solution. And so take as much as you can, because the better you can get internally, the more whole of a person you're going to bring to your spouse. And that will honestly give them space to do the work they need to on themselves. So I would also just say, man, I'm so sorry. I know how painful this is. I've talked to more than enough people, and through the many tears that they've shed around how difficult this is to be in a relationship where this is a prevalent issue. And your pain is valid, and you deserve to be known in that, and to have somebody walk alongside you, people, a community, even your spouse addicted, to walk alongside of you to get healing and to find safety and trust in this relationship again.
Right. Well, thank you, Aaron. That's a very empathetic answer. I appreciate that. Now, there are guardians watching, grandparents, parents. What do you teach people? I hear different things about use of computers and cell phones for children and teenagers. I mean, it's a mixed bag. So,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. There's a great book that just came out by Exodus Cry, which is an organization doing a lot of work on ending not ending pornography. Like, they understand this is
Right.
going to be around for a long time, if not forever, but to lessen the impact that it has on kids just discovering it. So they're working on legislation to combat that. They're working on
Good.
information. And they're doing amazing things. So one of the guys who is like the founder of it, Benji Nolet, had written a book called Raised on Porn, and it came out real recently. But in it, he gives a lot of practical examples, and there's actually a ton of great books and resources out there. Moral Revolution has a lot of great resources on that. And anyways, I would tell them, hey, you can't just hope that nothing shows up, because
Right. It's going to happen.
it's going to
Yeah.
happen. Kids are, you need to, like, we want to dispel the idea of having the talk and create the idea of having the talks. Needs to be an on sexuality
Right.
and understanding pornography and the things that are out there. It needs to be an ongoing conversation, and you need to create a safe place. If your kids, grandkids,
Right.
whoever you're in charge of, if they feel safe with you, it will reduce the amount of shame that they feel when they encounter something that, like pornography or sexual activity with another person, or whether that be like a peer or an adult, and it's actually sexual abuse. The lowest amount of shame that you can bring to the topic of sexuality, the more safe they're going to feel coming to you and wanting to stay connected when something happens. And so that's the first one. Just create a safe place where, like, hey, this isn't your sexuality is not something to be ashamed of. It's something God created, but it's something that you don't want to be all alone in. Like, just to have somebody who is a safe place is first and foremost. But honestly, then porn blockers like are a legit
Right.
helpful option, especially when you have kids, to monitor it, to put good boundaries around it, and to download the software necessary to make it difficult. Like, it's not gonna.
Right.
There's no porn blocker that will guarantee effectiveness, and because there are ways around it. However, you want to make it as difficult as possible to protect the people around you.
I like that. And I like what you said about not just a sex talk, but
Yeah.
ongoing conversations and
Yeah.
talks. A lot of what I hear from parents now that have kids in school, teens in school, is their kids are really hijacked by porn. Hey, look at this,
Yeah, yeah,
right in their
totally.
face. You can't help but see it, and kids are curious,
Oh,
and
totally.
so it's there, and that's so unfortunate. But
Yeah,
you've given us so many practical things today, with a spiritual heart that really wants freedom for people. And I
yeah.
just thank you, Aaron, for who you are and for what you're doing. Do you have a next book in mind?
I do, yeah, already. But it's probably one my wife and I will write together around marriage
Okay.
and being connected, working through communication, conflict, things like that. That we currently teach classes and do things like that, and we're just really
Right.
excited to see marriages heal on many levels. So that'll probably be the next book.
Okay, great. Looking forward to that. So again, here's Aaron's information. Want you to follow him and check out his book and look forward to his next book. Aaron, thank you for what you're doing in the kingdom. You're making our world a better place, and I wish you well. And to those of you who are with us today, thank you. This is really an enlightening subject. You've done a great job, Aaron. I appreciate it.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Okay, well, everybody, have a blessed week, and I will see you next week.